Afternoon and welcome to the Center for Black Studies. Welcome to our fellowship, our fellow series and lectures. This afternoon, I would like to introduce Dr. Jeffery Stewart. He is a professor of Black Studies obviously here at UC Santa Barbara since 2007, when he was hired as the chair of the Department of Black Studies, a position he served in until 2016. During his tenure as chair, he advanced a number of campus projects, including the North Hall 1968 Takeover Display, which opened in 2015, and Jeffery's Jazz Coffee House, which opened in 2016, an immersive pop-up jazz experience in Isla Vista to accompany his course, The History of Jazz. Jeffery's most recent book is The New Negro, The Life of Alan Locke, published by Oxford University Press, 2018. It is one of the few books of history that has won the 2018 National Book Award for Nonfiction and the 2019 Pulitzer Prize for Biography. It also won such additional prizes as the 2019 Mark Linton History Prize of the J. Lucas Prize Project Awards, 2019 James A. Raleigh Prize of the Organization of American Historians, 2018 Black Caucus of the American Library Association Award for Nonfiction, 2018 Prose Award for Best Biography, Autobiography Association of American Publishers, and the 2019 American Book Award of the Before Columbus Foundation. It was also a finalist for the 2019 Plutarch Award of the Biographers International Organization, the 2019 Randy Schiltz Award for Gay Nonfiction of the Publishing Triangle, the Hurston Wright Legacy Award for Nonfiction, and the 2018 NAACP Image Award for Autobiography and Biography. Thank you very much. It is an honor to have you here, Dr. Stewart, presenting at the Center for Black Studies Research.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Dr. Telaga, I know I should say, but I feel so close to you and all of the work that we have done. It's hard for me to not call you Sharon. And I also want to thank you for supporting this research with the funding that made it possible for me to carry out this project. I also want to thank Taylor Jackson for supporting and putting this series together. Also, my wife, Dr. Anissa Stewart, who played really a role in this project and who's here with us today. And also Raheem Jessup, who is one of the key people in this project, as well as Naz Allen, who is also a person who's worked on this project with us. So I guess what I'll do right away here is move up to the slide. I hope I can share this. Maybe I can do this. I don't have any sound, so don't have to worry about that. I'm going to share this up here. Hopefully I can get this to work in the right way. So calling this Another University is Possible, that's kind of probably an ambitious title, but it comes from sort of way back when I kind of got interested in this issue. In 2010, there was a rebellion at UC San Diego when one of the stations, campus radio stations, did a Compton cookout, which of course they thought was very funny, but it led to rebellion by Black students on that campus in 2010. But it also highlighted other issues of alienation that cursed throughout the campus, felt by Black faculty, Black students, and it led to the formation of a Black student faculty staff collective. They actually visited UC Santa Barbara, and I have a copy of the book that they put out that essentially said, another university is possible. It could be that we could have a place where, demonizing Black students, students of color, is not part of the necessity of getting an education in the UC system. Various testimonies, I think the chancellor had to resign, et cetera. But I did notice that, I think it was 2019 or 20, there was another statement that said, things had changed. They weren't doing Compton cookouts, but fundamentally, many of the issues that had bothered people were still there. There hadn't been really a fundamental change in the climate on campus. So, and this goes along with other writings that have been going on. The Undercommons by Stefano Harvey and, Fred Houghton and others, talking about that there is a, say, underground of people, often in these universities, who are struggling against these problems, but carve out a way of building forms of solidarity, alternative modes of study and research, connections among students, faculty members who are excluded from the running of the university. So I was really struck by this because, I know that posing another university in the midst of the one we're in seems ambitious, but it is important to recognize that people are trying to actually carve out a different way of being in this university, even if they don't run the university. And so that kind of concept has intrigued me. So then in 2015, Dr. Nisa Stewart and I and another PhD graduate from GGSC did an article called Students Engaging in Diversity, which is really mainly focused on using blogging. It was really ahead of its time, I think, in the sense that it was already looking at online ways of creating engagement between students and the material. And so that kind of already got me into thinking along these lines. I think the only thing that I've noticed is that the concept of engagement usually is sort of factored through a kind of neoliberal lens when you're talking about it, as in students ought to engage. A lot of the pressure in the discourse about student success seems to really be about what students do, not so much on what the university does. So in, I guess it was 2019, Anissa and I co-taught a class at GGSC, which had formerly been taught by Judith Green, on classrooms as cultures. And the idea that, you could look at a classroom, and even now in terms of a campus even, as a culture, having distinct codes, attitudes, behaviors that can be sort of studied as something that is either enabling to the students and the faculty and others, or disenabling. What is classroom culture was really the key question. We explored that. And during that period of time, we had as one of our students, Raheem Jessup, who was a doctoral candidate in the School of Education, Graduate School of Education. And he took the class and he wrote a paper and he kept pursuing us talking about this concept of embracement. So a step away from engagement, embracement. And he said that he was interested in that in terms of UCSB because he came from an HBCU where that feeling of being embraced by the university was quite common. And he noticed that he didn't seem to feel that at UCSB. And why was that? And even theorized that UCSB essentially doesn't embrace its Black students. So being, a person who tries to think in terms of the experimental, especially in this area, and relying on expertise that Anissa had, and also his interests, decided to put together a proposal for the Center for Black Studies Research to actually engage students with this question. Do you feel embraced by UCSB? And how do you feel embraced? How does that actually work? And I was very fortunate to have an undergraduate Nas Island, who was at the center, who agreed to work with Raheem to essentially carry out the interviews with a set of students to try to determine whether they felt embraced by the university. I put up here this new organon of education from Francis Bacon, just so that people don't realize that, this is kind of like cosmopolitan education up here in the Center for Black Studies. But I'm interested in Bacon because he was the one who sort of more than anyone else he argued for the scientific basis of knowledge. That so much knowledge that we communicate is sort of based on our sense of things, or whether it's true or not, or we believe it's true. But Bacon was one of the first that said that experimental knowledge is the only true knowledge. When you go and actually go out and test these ideas and find out if there's evidence for them. And so that's what led us to conduct this modest study. So we conducted that study and collected the data. Unfortunately, just say this at the beginning, we faced a lot of difficulties because of the onslaught of COVID during the process during which we were collecting the data. So we had a much more modest sample than we would have had afterwards, and our attempts to follow up were also affected by the fact that many students left campus. So this is just a modest, beginning really to a larger study that we hope to do later on. So in this study, 15 students, and of course there was one graduate student, but we're not really including here. This is really focused on undergraduate students who self-identified as Black, were interviewed. And you see kind of the breakdown of, a lot of fourth year and third year students, fewer of the first and second, a variety of majors from STEM, social science, and also humanities, almost balanced, not more males than women, but nevertheless somewhat balanced there. 1 hour interviews that were conducted with a set of questions that we worked on collectively for a while to get the right balance, whether they felt embraced, particularly why they chose to attend UCSB, which we wanted to find out. Did they feel a sense of belonging? We wanted to have belonging in there because sometimes embraced may not actually communicate. And then we also then asked them what they thought embracement meant, so that they would form a kind of resource of informants in addition to being interviewees. This was the definition that we utilize. And again, the focus here against the engagement paradigm, you usually see that when students are accepted into an institution, and the responsibility lies on the university to develop these students psychologically and academically. Embracement being about the whole person, not just the scholarly part. So some of the initial results, the reasons they chose, obviously overwhelming number came here because of academics. Many spoke positively about the academics. Of course, some spoke negatively about the academics. And so this idea that Raheem is having of being sort of alienated, or not, that the institution is not reaching out to help you, seemed to come up a little bit in into some of the data. Limited sample, certainly, and both sides here. And then the idea that there is a culture. We talked about classrooms as culture. Now it's sort of universities as culture that help certain, too much evidence, but that feeling of being on the outside of a culture was something that one of the students shared. More than half of the students shared about family influences as why they chose UCSB. Obviously, it's very important. California students, what kind of backgrounds that they grew up in, getting a scholarship, family influences, those sorts of things. Many students felt positively attached to and described the campus in many ways. They mentioned the beach, obviously, the mountain, how beautiful it is, the campus environment. Three found welcoming. Three mentioned that its location was far enough away from home, but yet not obviously out of state for them. When we use that concept of belonging, found that 13 students said have a sense of belonging. But what was interesting to us is that the reasons or the source of that sense of belonging varied. In particular, what I found striking, I'll talk about this a little later, is that 7 of those 13 said that their sense of belonging came about through their affiliation with the Black Student Union. 4 said they didn't feel a sense of belonging at all. But then, of course, of meeting the right people, 2 mentioned finding good friends, but that 7 who found that sense of connection through the Black Student Union, I think it's very significant. Some were very strong, and maybe Naz can talk about this a little bit later, that they didn't have a sense of belonging. That they kind of expected mentorship, which is something that Raheem was talking about earlier, that, you go to HBCUs, that people take on mentoring, they're there for you. That wasn't the case. And, some were overwhelmed somewhat by the level of, knowledge and sophistication, language, code switching, entering a very high level of academic rigor was alienating for some. The students had their own definition, which I thought was interesting, of embracement. 10 said they thought it was being acknowledged and accepted for who they are, rather than, we see this a lot in the recent work on anti-racism by many people that talk about not having to feel like you have to assimilate in order to be someplace. They felt like embracement meant that you would be accepted for who you are. It should be automatic. And then others thought, it was a process of being warm and welcoming, feeling at home. When asked, do you feel like this university embraces its needs? 10 out of 15 responded with some version of no. So pretty strong there. 6 of these 10 indicated that although the institution didn't embrace them, they were individual people and organizations like BSU that did embrace them. Some came without expecting to be embraced. And this, obviously, students who have been brought up in the neoliberal world we're in now understand that places like UCSB, particularly state universities, have a reputation for this, as opposed to HBCU or a small liberal arts college. Interesting to us is one differentiated the academic from the psychological, that academically there was a fair amount, but psychologically it was very alienating. 5 students said that they did feel that the university embraced their needs. Some people felt there were a lot of people on campus who did help, or at least tried to help Black students. The sort of core of Black students and professors and staff, counselors in particular, which we know as a result of the 2012 BSU demands that there were Black counselors put in the counseling center. That I thought was interesting, that of the small number of Black professionals here, they are very aggressive in reaching out to students. And person saying that embracement of Black people, in her experience, came from other Black people in strategic positions. often maybe the only person in there, like in the housing and residence office, that really advocate for Black scholars, for Black students. So that sort of suggested that, the number of faculty and staff on campus is directly correlated with feelings of embracement. Of course, in general, students, six of them at least, bemoan the lack of representation of Black people on the campus. A lot of, kind of sense of alienation, being in an environment that doesn't mirror you is very important, and feeling like there needed to be more of this, particularly in STEM classes. Four students brought up the concept of otherness and how Black students are made to feel different or less than. At the same time, they also volunteered ways that the university could be more inclusive. And this is something, some of the data here conferred things that came up during the town hall that Dr. Teleda and I had with Victor Rios, where he talked about how that you can be in these work groups and people don't want you in there. Those kinds of alienations really coming from the student body even. And not feeling a safety net from professors. So I just want to conclude with that is that there's a lot of data in there, and I want to finish up so you can ask about this. But one of the things I got from it, was striking to me, was that 7 out of the 15 said that it was BSU that gave them the sense of embracement. And this resonated with me because, of course, as Dr. Telledal said, I came in 2007, really the end of 2007. In 2008, I was tasked almost immediately with doing the 40th anniversary celebration of the 1968 North Hall takeover. And I met a lot of people there. And then, of course, in 2018, I did the 50th anniversary. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that takeover. And on one hand, that takeover is pitched as a kind of protest movement and which of course it was, and it secured the Black Studies Department, the Center for Black Studies Research. But I think in a general sense, what the students then were after is sort of similar to what we were looking at here, that students wanted to be embraced by the university, not just sort of tolerated, which I think is often the feeling that I got from looking at this. And with that, suggesting that in order for the students, Black students, to be embraced, there might have to be, in some sense, a new understanding of the relationship of the university to all of its students. Because it seems like that this sort of cold, alienating attitude, while very particular to Black students, seems to be a posture of the university toward many students and not just the Black students. Of course, this was something that we wanted to do. We wanted to follow up and run this study throughout the campus. Just anecdotally, when I was talking with some of the students, when I was able to have office hours on campus, and I mentioned this, they'd say, yes, I don't feel embraced either, as a white student. So it might be kind of a systemic posture of this university or UCs in general, which leads to the question of, can there be a new definition that might come from this? I believe that the Black students who took over that were from BSU were already advancing what I'm calling a new organon after Francis Bacon, a new definition of how a university should engage, embrace its students. I think that's one of the contributions. Plus, I think another aspect of this is that while many people have characterized BSUs as separatists and that sort of thing, in fact, this data suggests that BSUs are actually playing a role in helping integrate Black students more into the life of the university than they would feel without them. That the BSU plays a role in creating a undercommons, let's say, of embracement that is sustained over time and leads to, and we didn't check this yet, uh, more of a success rate for Black students making it through UCSB and graduating, which is really something that is usually not discussed that much when you're in these meetings with upper level administrators talking about the BSU. Even the demands actually create more of an ability to sustain oneself here for 4 and 5 years as a Black student. An example of that is the 2012 BSU demands team had as one of its key demands a North Hall display, that they wanted the history and presence of Black students on campus to be visualized and interpreted around this event, this transformative 68 event. And in the course of that, we were able to put up in North Hall underpass a large display, a display that many students now sort of gravitate to. In fact, if you come on campus and you're a Black student, one of the few places you could actually go to see Black people visualize is this North Hall display. Well, this North Hall display came about because of the BSU. BSU actually created this site of embracement for the whole campus and for those coming after it in a way that wouldn't exist before. And then when we had the 50th anniversary, you see people came and posed in front of the display, embracing one another, but also proving that the agency of the BSU created a site for embracement that is sustainable over time. I want to end, of course, I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't mention my man Alan Locke, because interestingly enough, referencing Francis Bacon in 1950, he asked for an update on the notion of the new organon in education. And what he said is, we've become so obsessed with specialization into disciplines that the thing that holds us together as students and faculties and learners, values, shared values, like the value of a student or the value of embracing a student, are lost. And that education, to really be what we hope it to be, needs to develop a new organon. And I would suggest that buried in this data, and of course it's not a great deal of data, is that idea that there does need to be a new conception of what it means to have and be educated at UCSB. And I think it's coming out of the experience of Black students, their reaction to it. They're creating structures that actually enhance embracement, and those structures actually being such that, if generalizable, might actually be very beneficial to other students on campus as well. So those are just some of the initial responses to the, like I say, modest study that we were able to do. And my thanks to Raheem and Naz Allen and Anissa Stewart for working with me in really what was a collective research project, which I think is also epitomizes the sort of BSU vision of research and knowledge formation on this campus. Thank you very much. Maybe I should put the screen back up, but is there any questions, or can I answer any questions that everybody has? I have to say, even after all this time, I'm not particularly good at the whole screen sharing thing. So maybe I'll just put that away for a moment and just try to answer any questions that you may have. Hi, Claudine.
Hello,
I see you.
Jeffrey.
Yes,
You,
here is the
everybody.
person here who is most responsible for me being at UCSB, and so I'm so glad to see her. And I think she herself has epitomized this idea that the Black Studies Department is supposed to embrace students. We all know that historically, the Black Studies departments were created by students, but often in the 80s, they were so critiqued by white conservative professors often as being hand-holding departments and all this, that then there was this period of time when Black Studies Department tried to have nothing to do with Black students, right? So they could prove to white people that they were really scholars. But one of the things that really attracted me to this department is that this department never succumbed to that ideological temptation. So thank you very much for that, Claudine.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey, and I also salute your team here, Anissa and Rahim and Naz, for this important project. And the fact that this notion of embracement came from Rahim with, the HBCU that he's coming from, tells you something about the nurturing that students get on some of those campuses. But as I've spent 30 plus years as a faculty of in the Department of Black Studies, and I've always felt that we were an enclave, this home away from home for the students, and that one part of the university where they really felt like they belong and they were embraced. So one question that I have is the data looking at the campus in general and then the enclave of Black Studies? Because I think we would learn a lot in terms of the mechanism put in place to support our students and to embrace them, okay? But I really love the concept of embracement. The other thing is I did spend 5 years in student affairs after working in Black Studies. And I have to say that this is what I found in student affairs. The sense that even though they supported knowledge production, even though they supported academic excellence with students, but they made them feel that they belong, and people try to meet their needs, as people within whatever context they were coming from. And I'm wondering again if it would be interesting to look at the kind of particular involvement and modes of functioning that we find in student affairs that are not found in the larger campus. And when you're talking about is another university possible, one of the things that I did in student affairs is trying to merge the academic side with the work of student affairs. And a lot of things have continued, the 195 series and, a whole bunch of things that have been going on where the connection is a bit closer. Is this new university that we should all dream of needing to also be working more collaboratively with student affairs? And I know you yourself have done things with, student affairs, with Margaret, with the jazz club. So is it what we need, like this new culture where our students are respected for who they are, where people really try to meet them where their needs are and offer the kind of embrace and support that each one of them deserves? So, but I really thought,
well, this is really, it's really limited sample. So I don't remember students, and maybe Naz, who's here, remembers. I don't remember students specifically mentioning student affairs. I think they mentioned counselors, people who are connected to student affairs. But I think, we were looking at the predominance of students were 3rd and 4th year students in the sample. So they had been here for a while. And so I think that they mainly felt, for whatever reason, that when they reflected on climate, which probably was adding up all of the experiences. And it also may be, that while, student affairs does many things, for many of these students, they said they came here for the academics. And so their orientation is, how am I doing in the academic world? And yourself, the academic world here is pretty good at walling itself off from student affairs type concerns. And this gets back to one of the fundamental obstacles, I think, here, is that it is a Research One AAU university in which the professors, the graduate students, everyone is told that what matters is your research, not your engagement even with students. So if that's the message that's going into, biology, chemistry, all of those places, then, what is the incentive for a professor to, instead of just giving her lecture and then running back to the lab, right, to sit and ask students and make herself available to students, knowing that that's going to take time away from finishing that article, which is going to be part. So the research, the challenge, I think, here is that we all know that most HBCUs don't have the research agenda pressure on them. They're beginning to get it, but they haven't in the past. So how do we adjust the university so we still get to meet our research goals, but at the same time create a more welcoming environment for Black students? Because I think we weren't able to test this, but I think that the more welcoming the environment is, the more successful the students will be. And that's really the challenge. This campus seems to me to be, I was thinking of Roberto Strongman and his work on Brazil, a series of quilombos. They're little isolated villages, and you kind of move between them, but sometimes if you just come and you're in STEM, you may never even get over to the art side, or you may not go over there. So it might be something for student affairs to think about, is to what extent does it specifically, aggressively embrace Black students rather than simply students of color, underrepresented minorities? Sometimes it seems to me like Black students get lost in the list, right, of people who are supposed to be cared for, because we all know there's limited amount of time even for administrators to do this kind of work. But thank you for that. Yeah. We might include a question about student affairs in a later survey.
I have a question, Dr. Stewart.
Hey, Jeremy. How you doing, Jeremy?
Doing good. It's a pleasure.
Dr. Edwards.
Yeah. It's a pleasure to to join the space here. I had a quick question. So again, thank you for the work and also the collaboration also with Naz and with Anissa and Raheem. So one of my questions, just given the themes that were found, so with the plan to reinsert into the academic spaces right soon, given this pandemic, these pandemic concerns, with the plan of getting back to campuses, there are cohorts of students that either have never been on the UCSB campus, or those that were first year and second year students. They're now going to be, some have either graduated or some are on the brink of graduating. And so there's going to be a new sense of campus space in terms of those students and how to sort of socialize them on the campus. And yes. So what do you see in terms of like with some of the work and with the themes here? How do you see that how do you see that changing, or how do you see that looking like when students reintegrate into the university space.
Well, that's going to be really something that maybe we should monitor. You know, I think there have been some, shall we say, racial, ethnic, and gender differences in how students have experienced the pandemic. We weren't able to get enough research done. We were starting to do that about how we had an element of how COVID affected your sense of embracement, but it was really hard to do that once we were in COVID and people were left and, responses. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how different subjectivities react to coming back because we all know that, African American and Latino Americans have suffered the most in terms of extreme reactions to COVID and deaths, largely because of pre-existing conditions and those sorts of things. I know that I've talked with some students just informally who have expressed a lot of apprehension about being on campus, particularly Asian American and brown students. And in particular, there is a sort of student culture here that has been in some ways somewhat dismissive of COVID. So I've had a couple of students say that they were very concerned that it seemed like in Isla Vista and on campus, certain European American students refused to wear masks and refused to practice social distancing, feeling that as young white, millennials or whatever they are, they were immune or it wouldn't hurt them much. Whereas students of color didn't have that sense. They felt more vulnerability. So that might affect things like how much do you want to take an in-person class versus a hybrid class, right? I mean, that's something that I think would be very interesting for us to track. How much do people want to get back into classrooms that before the pandemic were already overcrowded? I mean, how can you practice social distancing in a class of 120 students when there are only a handful of classrooms on campus that even have 120 seats? So yes, if a philosophy of embracement on the part of the administration might take this into account and use COVID as an opportunity to innovate how we think about the classroom. We have so much open space on campus. Can we reinvent the classroom so it's more open than it is now? I've talked with a few people about that, but that would be something I think would be very, very important to look at, because I think that Black students and brown students and Asian American students are going to feel more vulnerable than other students. And if the university doesn't acknowledge that, that will be another example of not being embraced.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really good question. But I think that one of the things I just want to emphasize is I think that one of the takeaways I have from this research is that the university leadership might want to embrace BSUs more aggressively. My experience, because I was in BSU when I was in school, is that usually BSUs are largely invisible to the administration to a certain extent until there's a protest, right? Or something happens, the campus, the Compton cook, whatever. But if I was an administrator, I'd be saying, without co-opting and trying to determine what BSUs do, maybe the university can learn certain things from the BSU. And this gets back to this whole project itself. I mean, this is a project in which I've learned as much as I have provided anybody else. I see that Naz has his hand up. So Naz, if I can.
1 second, Jeffrey, if I can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Moderate a little bit. I think Mika was first.
Oh,
And
okay.
okay.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Oh yeah, real quick, Dr. Stewart, do you think that your research will be able, and you just talked about it, like the effectiveness of BSU, do you think that it could potentially lead to more funding to groups like BSU? Maybe not,
Should.
yeah, as just a way to, I mean, if the university is clearly, and like you said, this is a small sample size, but I'm quite sure they'll be conducted again with the bigger sample size. We'll find, similar results. But do you think that this can be used to provide more funding for these groups, so that way when new Black students do come onto campus, that they're immediately embraced by BSU, which has obviously seemed to have great success in the past?
Yes. No, I think so. And I mean, we all know since I was in BSU, uh, that the orientation in BSU sometimes change year to year. There's certain, because it's a changing cohort, right? And so obviously, some BSUs emphasize work study, academics more than others, right? I mean, there's just a philosophical. But yes, I think that the BSU, from what I can tell, is doing the work that some paid administrators are supposed to be doing. This is, of course, one of the things that's always been, kind of bad, right? I mean, because students still have to take all those classes and, pass those exams and deal with those professors and, and then also they have to be activists, and then also they're actually helping one another succeed. So that's a lot. So yeah, some appreciation and maybe even just recognition that maybe just funding alone isn't all that's necessary. I'm not sure what that is. I think BSU would have to think about that. But moving forward, obviously, BSU is more valuable and in different ways valuable, I believe, to the university than is commonly in the discourse about BSU that goes on campus.
I think it's Naz, and then Dr. Michelle, and then Jordan.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Naz.
Hey, Dr. Stewart, how you doing?
Good, good.
Okay, cool. So, going back to the research, one thing that came up with students that felt they were not embraced by the school was that they did not see, faces that looked like theirs. They didn't see other Black people in, these STEM classes, political science classes, whatever classes, they were in. So my question, well, actually, just a little bit more background into it. With my conversations with some of the presidents over at the BSUs at UCLA, UC Merced, UC Irvine, all these schools seem to have low Black student population. So I think with UCSB, I think among the UC system, we have the highest population of Black students relative to the amount of students at the campus. So I think we have like a 5% Black student population. UC Merced's like, let's see, I think around the same. UCLA is a little lower, all that. But
I think Berkeley only has 2%.
Yeah, that's horrible. But with that in mind, do you feel like it is possible to, for student affairs and for student administration to actually make Black students feel embraced when Black student numbers are so low, and these Black students are saying we don't feel embraced because there's hardly any Black people at the school?
Right. Well, yes. I mean, we need more Black students on campus. We also need more Black administrators, more staff, and more faculty. And it was actually the 2012 BSU Demands team that was saying we want more Black faculty in departments that aren't Black studies, right? That, like you say, in political science, in chemistry. But having served on these committees that evaluate departments, I've come to learn that, even when there's a kind of lip service for, diversity, somehow the outcomes still remain the same, that you have very, very few black faculty. So there's not even a person you can go to in chemistry. You can't go to someone in biology. I mean, think about how many black students are pre-biology, biology. I mean, so there's a kind of resistance in the academic area that is quite profound, and I'm not sure exactly what has to be done, but I would suggest that we need a hiring program here that aggressively says something like, you have a search. If you don't come back with a black person, I'm not going to fund the search, right? I mean, this has been done at some schools, and it's interesting. It's been done at some of these southern schools, right? Who we think are so racist, whatever. When they've seen that they have to do this, they've done it, because you see, the thing is black students actually contribute so much. That's what I'm getting from this. If the BSU is actually helping embrace black students, then that's like an extra job. You know what I mean? So when you bring a black student on campus, you're getting a person who's actually doing 2 or 3 jobs, not just being a student. So it's actually in the interest of the university to bring more black students. Same with faculty. Faculty are constantly reaching out and mentoring black students and mentoring white students more than the white professors. We're going to try to start doing that next. Study that next. So the university, for its own self-interest, I think that's the key thing I got out of this, for its own self-interest would do well to increase the numbers of black students, increase the numbers of black faculty, increase the number of black staff, because it would actually spread this feeling of embracement, not only among black students, but I predict among other students as well. Not to say that no students felt embraced, because some did, right? I think one of the things in the study that shows that students who came from upper middle class, suburban, white areas in California tended to feel more comfortable here, because they understand that that's how those spaces roll anyway, right? They don't help you. They're not, you don't expect to be helped. But I think there's still a significant number of black students who are coming from predominantly black or mixed race communities who need to feel comfortable and a sense of belonging on this campus. And it can be done. That's
Dr. Stewart,
yes.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but we have 2 more questions from Dr.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Michelle and one from Jordan, and we have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Dr. Michelle, please go ahead.
Oh, yes, Claudine.
Sorry, I raised my hand by mistake. I was just trying to type a short.
Okay, all right, okay. Jordan?
Hi, y'all. Sorry, I came late because I had another meeting, but thank you for putting together this event. I just wanted to kind of ask a question, or just kind of share something related to your point on BSU, Dr. Stewart. Just because in my experience, like working in BSU exec, I think one of the critical flaws or concerns I have with the administration is that there's no really set structure or support system in place for BSU to do that job of assisting with recruitment, retention, community organizing, like event programming, all of those things. Like there's no, like you said, there's really that invisible, there's that invisible perception of BSU, and like I think really just Black student orgs in general on campus. And so I'm just trying to think of how we could kind of vow for something to be given to us, or some sort of resource for it really feels like a resource to be able to provide more resources, because it's in a lot of ways I feel like the BSU exec really has to put their heads together and formulate the solutions that the administration should already be providing us with. So it's like it starts this cycle where it's less appealing to do the work, or there's less people present willing to do the work, because there's not really a clear-cut path or way to do it.
Yes.
And there's just not a lot of help that comes with it. You know, we end up having to, you know, reach out to Black faculty and staff, but like it really doesn't come directly from the administration. And even if in talking with the administration, like in the past like 2 quarters, there was kind of like some minimal effort to help us, and then it kind of just like fell off. So it's just like, how can we get that to be a sustainable practice and something that we're able to like hold them accountable to? Because it's just like, it's always in these moments of, you know, critical or like unrest, like during the height of, you know, Black Lives Matter protests and things like that, where they send out a performative statement and then they follow up with some sort of like little action or meet with us once. And it's just like beyond those moments, how can we get people to just care about Black students generally?
Well, you know, it's a very good point that you make there. And one of the things I've noticed is that almost in all of the demands that have occurred, you know, there was like let's say the 2012 demands, if I'm not mistaken, a key demand in there was to have Black students, demands team members part of these decision-making processes that you laid out. Have them involved in admissions, involved in counseling, and involved in retention. So that, of course, now the other thing that kind of came out of that is the Office of Black Student Development. And so hopefully that will be a place where some of that work will be done. But I think what you're pointing out is that BSU are knowledge makers, and they often are not seen that, right? They're not seen as that having that kind of steering, you know, and there's a resistance to allowing students to set the agenda in these various spaces, as if, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. It's just that kind of condescension towards students when, if we look at it, the reason we are here right now, being able to have this conversation in the Center of Black Studies, is because of students. You see, so I always remember that when I go into the department. The reason I'm here, I didn't get invited here by the Department of History, by the Department of Sociology, right? I got invited here by the Black Studies Department. So that Black Studies Department came from Black students. So maybe we can start working more closely with you in BSU once things come back about how we as professors can help learn from you and also help move this ball down the road, because we definitely need it to be moving.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stewart, for your amazing presentation. I think based on the research that you've done, we have learned a bit more about University of California, Santa Barbara. And I liked all these questions and ideas and suggestions that arose, and hopefully we can get some of these things implemented and embrace them in a way that people are feeling embraced. Thank you to all the undergraduate research fellows, as well as the postdocs and graduate students who are also faculty fellows at UCSB. Everyone,
All right.
8 o'clock, have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.